Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Blastburn Radio. I am your host, Jolly by Nature, and with me today I have a very, very special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Oh, am I that special? Hi, I'm Nathan K., the host of Silph Radio, a Pokemon podcast.
Nathan, how the hell are you today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm really, really, really good, actually. Today's been a pretty solid day. I can't complain. So we're bringing Nathan on the show today as the first in an ongoing series of episodes that we're going to host on Blastburn Radio, just spotlighting community content creators, because just like we're trying to create, great, interesting content to entertain you guys out there, we really, really want to turn you on to other people who are doing cool, interesting things that are different from what we're doing. Because, we're filling a very specific niche, but there are tons of other, podcasters and YouTubers and Twitch streamers and, hell, who knows what else, comic artists maybe, crazy off-the-wall shit making really cool content for you, and we want to turn you on to it. And I very much wanted Nathan to be the first of this series, and I'm very glad he agreed to do so because I got to tell you, I really, really love the show, Nathan.
Thank you. That's an honor. That's the greatest thing to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. I worked really hard on it, so.
Yeah, you can tell, man. The production value for a fan show is really, really high. So Nathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Silph Radio?
Basically, well, I started doing podcasting with my best friend Craig Lewis, and we do a show called Fairpoint Podcast, which basically our principle in that, the idea was that informative podcasts are a little too dry, but comedic podcasts, there's just not much to them. Whereas if we gave ourselves the opportunity to pick a topic and then thoroughly research it, but give that use that as sort of a basis, as something to tell jokes about, rather than what a lot of comedy podcasts are, which is just like comedians talking to each other about nothing. And from there, I love Pokemon. I'm obsessed with it. So eventually I wanted to do a Pokemon podcast because it wouldn't satisfy me to just do a couple episodes about Pokemon. And I sort of started off with that as the same principle. Pick something in Pokemon and use that as the set off for just funny conversation. But it's more than that too. We do really try to make it as comedic as possible, but it's also a really obsessive look into the tiny corners of the Pokemon universe. One episode might be completely about a specific city or a specific Pokemon evolutionary line or a specific character or a game or a movie or a manga. And there's a variety of hosts. It's honestly, I don't know. I love Pokemon, and since I can't live in the Pokemon universe, this is the next best thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was hopeful that Go was going to scratch that itch for me at least, but I think we've seen how that's turned out at this point.
Yeah, nothing's going to scratch that itch for me short of living in the Pokemon universe. But hey, one day, VR would be pretty cool.
Well, it's coming. It's got to be coming eventually, and that's going to be really fucking neat when it finally comes around.
Oh, I can't wait.
So, how exactly did you originally become interested in Pokemon? Like, how did you discover the series? What scratched that itch for you?
Okay, so I was at school, and I was legitimately sick. I legitimately went home sick from school. I wasn't just faking it. And my mom must have been hip to this, that I wasn't just faking it, because on the way home, we stopped at McDonald's. I remember vividly. I was probably 7th grade, I guess. This was like the year before Pokemon came out in America. We stopped at Blockbuster, and I had the option of renting a game or a movie, and there wasn't much I wanted there, so I was like, hey, can I get this new issue of Nintendo Power? It's got Yoshi's story on the cover, and I love Yoshi. So I picked up the new issue of Nintendo Power, went home, ate my McDonald's, and read the Nintendo Power, and in it, there was this tiny little blurb about pocket monsters, and I don't think it even said Pokemon. If it did, it said both, but it described it as sort of a Tamagotchi meets Final Fantasy-esque game, and there was a screenshot from Red and Blue with Red just standing in the middle of a town, the player sprite standing in the middle of a town, a screenshot from the original Pokemon Stadium, which was never released here, but basically the same thing as the one we got with Blastoise and Charizard facing each other. And then I think a picture from Hey You Pikachu, so like a little CG Pikachu. And instantly, and it was like there's 150 different monsters, and I could see 3 of them on that page that all looked cool. And the fact that I was like, oh my god, there's 147 more of these, and I was obsessed with Tamagotchis. I had like 5 of them. I'm a loser. And I loved RPGs. Chrono Trigger was always one of my favorite games. So I was like, when this game comes out, like I remember telling all my friends, like, guys, this is going to be dope. And the more coverage Nintendo Power gave it, the more I just got really hyped, and it finally came out. And, you know, of course, it wasn't long before everybody jumped on that bandwagon for good reason.
Well, that is really, really cool. Like, I tend to consider myself a pretty early adopter, and you still beat the shit out of me. So that is really neat, actually.
Well, you know, yeah, before it was cool.
So are you calling yourself a Poke hipster?
A little bit, maybe. Ironically, though.
Okay. As long as it's ironic, that's okay then.
I don't know whether that makes it worse or better. Does that make me more of a hipster or less of a hipster?
I'm honestly not sure. Either way, it leaves kind of a.
It's like holding up a mirror to a mirror, basically.
It puts a Portland taste in my mouth, and that's kind of salty and gritty. I don't know how I feel about that.
Because if it makes me less of a hipster, then I would be happy with that. But that would kind of make me more of a hipster in essence of. Okay, let's talk about Pokemon.
Okay, yeah, that's enough hipsters. So then you were, again, obviously a very, very early adopter. You were hyped the series before the games were even out here stateside. So when they did come out, I mean, obviously something has kept your interest for, you know, the last 20 years. But did they, when you actually got to lay hands on them, did they live up to that high expectation you already had going in?
Oh God, yes, they did. Absolutely. I spent every waking hour playing them. There was a rule in my house that there was no video gaming on the weekdays, only on weekends. And I just superseded that rule by sheer force of will. I don't know how I did it. Like, it took months for my parents to catch on and suddenly go, hey, wait, what do you mean you're meeting with kids after school to play Pokemon? There's no video games on weekdays. And I'm like, you don't get it. You don't get it. Pokemon's different. I won't play video games. Pokemon's not a video game, Mom. You don't get it. No, I would walk to school in the winter with my gloves off so I could keep training my Charmander.
Oh man, I totally get that. It's funny because I was allowed to play video games through the week, but my grades suffered so much after Red and Blue came out that the rule became that I could not play Pokemon until the weekends. And then it was pretty much it entered my hand on Friday after school and didn't get put away until Sunday before bed. So no, I totally get that. So I suppose the question then, the question that separates the Poke Boys from the Poke Men, who was your first starter?
Oh, God. You know, I think it was Bulbasaur, but it pains me to say that I honestly don't remember because in the early days, I restarted that game so many times with the Game Shark codes, and my friend got the game before I did. My first experience with the game, because his mom was more likely to buy him shit than mine was him giving me the call like, dude, I got Pokemon, and I was like, I'm grabbing my Super Game Boy. That was the thing that let you play your Game Boy games through the Super Nintendo onto the TV.
Mm-hmm.
Ran down and played it in his basement. Like, so it's lost in the fog of my memory, but I've always been a fan of like the green, the grass type, the forest type creatures. So I think it's kind of likely I went with Bulbasaur, but I know that I've played with all 3 of those starters, and that's one of the only generations that I absolutely love all 3 of them. I can't pick a favorite. It's the only generation I think that I can't pick a favorite.
That's a really fair opinion. It actually makes me kind of happy that Bulbasaur is getting some love. Literally none of our hosts picked Bulbasaur. Not a single one.
And I get that. I get it.
And actually, the guy who got stuck with him in our challenge kind of threw a fit about it. So it's nice that someone's giving the little green guy some love.
I love Bulbasaur, but yeah, I do understand you've got Charizard and Blastoise, which are both very iconic, bombastic creatures. And yeah, I can see why Bulbasaur gets the snub, but...
Oh man, Blastoise was always my favorite, but I really, really don't like how he adapted to the 3D models. Like, I don't think that I could pick him in a current generation game. He just
really.
he doesn't he looked threatening in the sprites, and now he just looks like chubby and derpy. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing, but I don't like it.
Well, that was what I loved about the early days of Pokemon was, and that's what Silph Radio is that so much of it was fueled by your imagination and what is it like to actually be in this world. Me and my brother actually wrote Pokemon journals. God, I wish I still had these, but we got a notebook dedicated to writing a diary as if we were a Pokemon trainer on our journey and like the different Pokemon we caught in Mount Moon, and then we coincided it so we both went on the SSN at the same day so we could write about battling each other, and God, we're such losers. But that, like, the depictions of it in the game, because they were more simplistic, just allowed you to use your imagination, and in the same way that somebody playing Dungeons and Dragons would, and really build this world in your head as you're playing it, you know?
Oh yeah, I totally get that. And I mean, again, don't get me wrong, I'm not shitting on the new games. Like I love the Generation 6 and the Generation 7 games. But yeah, there's definitely something to be said for in some ways less being more. And it's the difference between watching a movie and reading the book. Like, yeah, watching the movie is great. It's really entertaining. It's a lot of fun. But when you read the book, you can really just kind of mentally explore the content, and you just don't get that when they just lay it all out there for you. And I feel like it's kind of a similar experience between going between the really really old style, very dialogue sparse, very story sparse, experience driven Pokemon games versus now the complete opposite end of the spectrum in Sun and Moon, where it's so incredibly story driven that you can't walk 2 feet without a cutscene, and it's almost painful to replay because the story is just so heavy. Like, not bad. It's probably the best story they've ever told. It's just so heavy.
And that's not what I came up associating Pokemon as like, yeah, there isn't really a big story because it's meant to just be like almost a sandbox world for you to play around in and then battle and trade your friends and just create your own personal character. So adding too much of a story would spoil that. But at the same time, I respect, that they're doing the stories as well. But I don't know. I still love the new generations as well. I can't actually expect them to just keep doing 2D, limited games like that. That's ridiculous. I want to see them do a fully fleshed out VR like that, so I can walk around Kanto. That'd be amazing. So, of course things are going to progress, and I think they've been doing great. A lot of the new Pokemon are fantastic. I haven't played Sun and Moon, but I like what I've seen.
Oh man, you have to pick those up and play them. Like they are totally, especially the first time through. The first time through those games is a fucking experience.
I have Sun. My girlfriend. I wanted Moon, but my girlfriend got them, so she gave me Sun, and I just didn't have. I don't have time to play it. Like one of these days, hopefully. I mean, I haven't even finished X and Y to be honest, but ouch. I know.
Yeah, that's a little painful, but I understand. Being a grown up fucking sucks sometimes. I really love the fact that 20 years in, Game Freak and Creatures Inc. and the Pokemon Company are not afraid to keep trying new things. Like that's my biggest takeaway personally from Sun and Moon is it's so different in so many fundamental ways from the rest of the Pokemon series, and some things worked really really well, some things not as much, but it's nice that they're willing to reinvent the wheel a little bit. It'd be so easy with a franchise that's gotten so big and so marketable to just cash in at this point, especially, and this is getting way, way off topic here, but as marketable and profitable as the mobile market has been for the Pokemon Company in the last 3 years ish since Go and Rumble and all that other shit came out. It'd be easy for them to just abandon traditional games altogether and just say, you know what, at this point, this is just a stable of characters that move product, and we're just going to make our money selling, bullshit on Pokemon Go. And they could totally do that. In fact, they might even be more profitable if they made that their main focus, but that they haven't, and I'm incredibly personally grateful for that because personally, at least, I still love the main series games.
And I'm pretty sure Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori are still like pretty involved in the creation of the new games and the new Pokemon and everything. I don't think they're as involved as they were originally, but I mean, it's something that was created by people with a passion for the art they were creating. You know, it wasn't just a video game to make money. As much as Pokemon gets that criticism so often as being just this capitalist, and you know, I get it, because they release 2 versions of every game and there's all these different monsters, you got to buy them all, but it really was art created by 2 artists that, I mean, I don't know how much you know about Satoshi Tajiri in the beginnings of Game Freak, but it was basically a video game zine, like how in America the punk rockers did zines in the 80s, these self-made, self-published, hand-drawn, handwritten magazines that were made on photocopiers about punk rock music. Ken Sugimori and Satoshi Tajiri were doing that. It was called Game Freak, and it was about video games, and then they eventually grew to an actual game production company, and like, so I think that's why Pokemon is, comparatively to a lot of the other Nintendo franchises, you know, like it's always growing, and I think it's still true to the spirit of Pokemon.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's going to be well, no, I take that back. This is the internet. There is going to be someone who's going to disagree vehemently and probably call you a cuck. But, you know, that's that's just kind of the world that we live in. I certainly don't disagree with you. So now that's enough of the softballs. Let's go for the real hardball here. You have to pick one. Gun to your head. Have to pick one. Who is your favorite Pokemon?
Ugh. Okay, well, it's either Raichu or Farfetch'd, and I have a tough time with this because, okay, in my experience, your favorite Pokemon changes every few months, but Raichu was my first favorite, I believe, and my most enduring favorite that pops up most often. But Farfetch'd, I have a long and complicated history with Farfetch'd. Me and my friends, we all each have sort of a character in mind, sort of our avatar in the Pokemon world, and Farfetch'd is my character's Pikachu, if you will, his buddy, his comrade, and but I think I'd have to say Raichu, because basing it just on the Pokemon alone, but I feel a little tinge of betrayal for my Pokemon partner when I say that.
That's solid. How do you feel about a Alolan Raichu?
Oh, Alolan Raichu's cool, but regular Raichu is just cuter, more badass. My favorite Pokemon would be Surfing Raichu, but I don't mean the Alolan Raichu. I mean a Surfing Pikachu that you used the Thunderstone on. That was a staple in my team, and it always infuriated me that I could never trade it forward, because you can't trade a Pokemon that knows HM moves. And so you trade it forward, you lose Surf, you can't reteach it Surf.
Well, yeah, and then again, they completely fucked us with that in Gen 3 anyway. They just said, oh, you can't have any of them anymore, deal with it. So
right.
That was, oh man, that is, to this day, I think the biggest reason why I don't like those games. I just can't get over my initial, what the fuck?
I grew to love Ruby and Sapphire. They were my least favorite gen. They probably still are, but I've grown to appreciate them. But it's just, you don't know how much time I spent with that Pokewalker, man, not taking into account that once I finally found a flying and surfing Pikachu, they would be stuck on my Soul Silver version forever, which is sad.
Oh, you can't trade them up to Gen 5 from the Pokemon?
Well, you can't trade any Pokemon that knows HM moves, so you have to erase their HM moves before you can trade them. And the HM reteacher won't reteach them the moves because the Pokemon doesn't naturally learn them.
Oh, that's some bullshit. I never played much of Gen 4 at all, really. And, you know, going from Gen 5 to Gen 6, you had the actual 3DS software that moved your Pokemon. So I don't think any of that was an issue there. That's some bullshit.
Oh, but Heart Gold and Soul Silver are possibly the best Pokemon games ever made. Black and White are great. I heard in your first episode that you just recently jumped into those, correct?
Yeah, that was my re-entry point into the series, and I love the shit out of those games.
Oh, Black and White, I think I don't know, it's possible those are my favorites since the originals. Like the originals are my favorites, or Fire Red and Leaf Green, but Soul Silver and Heart Gold are amazing. You definitely should give them a shot.
Oh no, absolutely. At this point, really, I'm only like sitting on the Generation 4 games just so that they're completely fresh when we get to them in our series, so that my reactions are real and unfiltered, as it were.
Oh,
Because
perfect.
I'm definitely the most experienced. I don't want to say the most jaded because I love the shit out of these games, but I've played all of them and played them all more than any of our other hosts. So those are going to be the ones where I'm going to be all, like doe-eyed. About the only thing I've ever done with Gen 4 is I watched a single Let's Play of Platinum on YouTube. That's it. So other than that, it's a
Okay.
completely fresh experience for me.
Hoenn and Sinnoh both kind of, they're similar games to me, at least aesthetically, I feel like. Not necessarily gameplay wise, but aesthetically in the Pokemon design and I don't know, the approach, the story. But yeah, Platinum was definitely a lot of fun, and it's really cool to see the Pokemon mythology taken to another level. So you'll have fun with that.
Yeah, they've definitely got the most epic set of legendaries in the series probably ever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's really a strength or a weakness, honestly, but it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, everybody would ask after that, well, what are they going to do now? How are they going to top that? They've already made God. And I'm like, they don't have to top it. They just have to make cool Pokemon. It's not always about topping things. I don't know.
And then Kalos came along and they just gave us the Bacon Bird of Death. So,
That's a good name for it.
Oh man, have you seen Yevtal's shiny sprite?
No, but its regular sprite is pretty bacony, is it not?
Yeah, but in its shiny sprite, all the black veiny bits are white, so it's literally
Oh
bacon.
God, I'm looking it up right now. Oh yeah, wow. It literally does just look like bacon.
Yep, it's just a flying piece of death bacon. It's great. I love it. All right, so if you had to pick one as well, who is your favorite series NPC?
Non-playable character, so like a gym leader or a Elite Four or anything like that.
Yeah, anything like that at all, even if it's like a rival, an evil team leader, anything.
You know, it's tough. Erica was my favorite gym leader in the games. Jeez. It's tough because I keep wanting to say Red, but he's not an NPC. You play as Red. He's an NPC in Gold and Silver. Does that count?
Yeah, no, I'd take that. That's solid.
Yeah, I've got to say Red because the journey of Red captivates me. That's another, keep bringing it back to Silph Radio, but like another thing that I think I'm always trying to do on there is uncover the story that was there that was more subtle. Like, I think there is a bigger story of what was going on. It was just told more subtly, and we overlooked a lot of it in our youthful exuberance and enthusiasm for this game, and in our, eagerness to put ourselves in that lead role and imagine what we would do in this world rather than what is the official canon story that happened here before Red went up onto Mount Silver,
Oh no, I would totally buy that. In fact, I've always kind of personally been of the opinion that probably really for all the arcs, but most especially for the red, blue, yellow arcs, that the Adventures manga is really kind of canon. Like, because there's nothing in the games that refutes it, and there's a lot of little hints that point towards it. Little things like the clues and hints around the Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar, and the sprites for Lieutenant Surge and Sabrina being very aggressive and kind of Rocket-like. Like, I've always just kind of been like, yeah, the manga's got it. That's really the shit that happened.
Well, to me, it's the closest thing to canon. I have a strict rule on the show where I'm like, canon, it's almost like how in Star Wars fandom, there's levels of canon. Like, G canon means it was confirmed by George Lucas himself or it's in the movies, and that's the highest level of canon. And then there's like another canon just below that, and then they're just below that. And the further removed you get, it gets down to just like pure expanded universe or fan fiction. But if it's in the games, if there's pure present evidence in the games, it's canon. And then the manga, the anime, and all the different mangas and animes are used as sort of in different interpretations. And I think between the manga and Pokemon Origins are the closest to canon. But there are slight things that would refute it and make it not canon. I mean, in the game, you don't have a Poliwag or a Poliwhirl before you get your Bulbasaur, and you don't have to go catch all of Oak's Pokemon. There's a very distinct thing that happens. You try to leave town, he comes and gets you. It may seem petty for me to pick something that, like small, but that's kind of what I want to do, is to look at this game and expand it from there and see it that way. But I absolutely love the manga, and I believe Satoshi Tajiri himself said, like, pretty much like, yeah, that's how I see the Pokemon world. That's the closest thing. So I pretty much agree with you, but slightly disagree.
No, that's totally solid and valid. And I mean, yeah, there's other little, even kind of more major plot points. Like, I've never seen Lancer the Elite Four as the antagonistic roles that they took on in the manga. But I was just more in broad strokes, I guess. I feel like the broader story of the manga is much more accurate to the games than anything else that's been released.
I'm not sure that the gym leaders were involved with Team Rocket. I think that's my biggest beef with the manga. And it's a great story, and I love... It's not actually a beef with the manga, but it's my biggest beef with considering it the canon, I guess. I think that they were distinctly separate entities, and Team Rocket was its own thing. Giovanni was the only gym leader in Team Rocket, in my humble opinion.
I mean, that's fair. I guess for me, the biggest red flag, well, I mean, aside from the obvious and kind of concerning connections between Blaine and Mewtwo, but my big red flag there was essentially the Sabrina sprite in Red and Blue, because either there's something darker going on with her, or she's just really into BDSM and doesn't care who knows about it.
Actually, we figured this out on Silph Radio. She was originally going to be a circus, like a ringleader, because there's actually a ton of evidence, and this is honestly like copyright Silph Radio original, not a fan theory we read online. This was while we were breaking apart Koga. We realized that Koga and Sabrina got switched early on in the development. I think that has already been sort of theorized.
Yeah.
But if you look further into it, you can see she has a whip. There's a lot of things about like Koga's gym that have to do with a circus. There's jugglers. Or maybe I'm not Koga's gym, but Sabrina's gym, or someone. But whatever the case was, she must have originally been intended to be some sort of circus type ringleader in like the beta. I don't know.
That makes sense. I know that they had to work with a very tight budget and rearrange a lot of assets in making those original games, so that would actually make sense.
It is so weird. Like, it's so glaringly obvious that, like, Venonat was meant to evolve to Butterfree and Metapod to Venomoth, but they switched. It's like, and why did they switch it? Like, a lot of these things, it's weird. It's curious. I'd love to pick their brains. And what the fuck is that truck doing there? What the fuck is that fucking truck doing there? God damn it.
Honestly, I feel like that the code in Red and Blue, not as much in Yellow, but in Red and Blue in particular, was just such a jumbled mess that truck was probably there because it was the only thing that kept the whole thing from falling the fuck apart. Honestly. But yeah, there's a lot of little mysteries there. Somebody sooner or later is going to make a documentary, and they're actually going to get the rights to those stories, and it's going to be a very successful project, I think.
Oh man.
But yeah, like that's a lot of really fun stuff to kind of think about and pick apart. And that's why I like listening to your guys' show so much. Like, you do a really, really good job of that. I haven't checked out that Koga episode yet. I'll have to download it.
Thank you.
Now, do you have any sort of experience or working knowledge with the focus of our show, with the Nuzlocke rule set or any other similar challenge mode rule sets?
No, I excuse me. I'm familiar with Nuzlocke. I know what it is. I've never attempted it. Like I said, I haven't had the time to play the main series games, so something like that's just out of the question. I took part in Twitch Plays Pokemon. That was a cool phenomenon to be a part of.
Yeah, I missed that whole explosion. I don't even remember what. I think that was actually right after my oldest daughter was born. And so I was just basically in a sleep fog coma for like 6 months before that shit got straightened out. But no, that is a really cool piece of internet history. That is really, really neat. Well, I'll tell you this. If you ever decide that you want to pick up and attempt a Nuzlocke of your very own, especially since you said you haven't played through them all the way yet to begin with, do X and Y. They are really, really fun games to Nuzlocke. The sheer variety of the regional Pokedex means that you can start over multiple times because you cocked up and never have the same team twice. You will always run into new and exciting things. And it's just fun. It's just super, super fun. So, little bit of unsolicited advice for me. If you ever decide that you want to pick it up and try it, those games are an excellent, excellent place to start.
Absolutely, I'll have to. And just because I'm obsessed with, trying to think about and interpret, what is this aspect of the Pokemon game like in the most pure real world version of the Pokemon world. I've got to start imagining like an actual trainer, an actual character in the Pokemon world on a Nuzlocke run, and what that character's journey would look like. And I don't know, it's just something interesting to think about, I guess.
Oh yeah, if you imagine that these little adorable pocket monsters are capable of dying in battle, then these games take on a whole new and not entirely pleasant dimension.
Well, would he then, is the idea that they are dying or that they're just being released?
No, the in canon idea is that they die in battle. That there is no fainting. That if your Pokemon faints, it is perished. That when you release it, you are essentially burying it.
He would strike deals with these other. He'd be like, "I want you to kill my Pokemon." Or would he just kill the Pokemon if it faints?
Oh no,
that's what would happen. Oh, this would be a dark movie.
It dies in battle. Like it's just done. Like the releasing is just a game mechanic. It's just
so I'm trying to think how this would work in the Pokemon universe that I've imagined, in which other Pokemon trainers would be horrified by this aspect and be like, "No, God, no." So this trainer would euthanize his Pokemon, and it's just a really horrifying idea. I'm sorry that I thought of it.
See, mine is, if anything, more horrifying because I just imagine that that's the way it is for everybody, and it's just this terrible blood sport. But yeah, so that's that, and that's the game that we're playing, which is a far less pleasant game, if you think about it in those terms. But I try not to. It's just kind of a fun little quirk. So our hosts are currently playing through the originals, the OG, the Generation 1 Pokemon games, Red, Blue, and Yellow. And depending on when exactly this interview winds up airing for our listeners, we will either be in the middle of that heated competition, or alternatively, we will have just completed that. I know that these games hold a very special place in your heart, Nathan. What are your biggest memories, your most important impressions of the original Pokemon games?
Oh my goodness, how do I narrow it down? The entire games themselves are one of the biggest impressions on my life. Geez. That's a big question. The original Pokemon games, I feel like that's I'm trying to think of a good iconic memory that I haven't brought up. Okay, here's a good one. That's very iconic, I think, for Pokemon and the original Pokemon games in general. Is I was at school one day and I went to very, very bad school. It was in the newspaper as a bad school. And there were a lot of really, really mean kids there. And I was in class one day playing Pokemon under my desk, and one of the bullies, who was not the type you would assume would ever play Pokemon, notices me playing it. And he's like, "Oh, shit. Yo, did you see the episode that aired this morning?" And I was like, no, I didn't see it, but I've seen them all, no big deal. Which one was it? And he's like, "Oh, there was this Pokemon, it could change into any Pokemon." And I'm like, yeah, that was Ditto. I've got one on my team. And he's like, "No, you don't." And just this moment of connection between me and this guy that normally would have just beaten my ass any other day of the week. And that's what Pokemon did. Like, everybody came together for Pokemon. I had friends that learned to play card games and ended up playing Magic the Gathering because Pokemon was the thing. And I mean, our music teacher was like a 24-year-old, and we would meet in his big giant music room after school pretty much every day to battle and trade. And because he was a video gamer and he thought Pokemon was awesome, so he was like our resident, like, Professor Oak. It was awesome. It's Pokemon was, and to me, like I said, still is not a video game, and so that's why I think I'm able to continue being a fan even though I'm not playing the games, because it's just something you are. You're a Pokemon trainer in your heart.
Oh no, that's completely accurate. I mean, for our generation in particular, those of us who are in the 27 to 37 range at this point in our lives, like it was a defining cultural phenomenon of our youth. Like it was, there was always that one weird kid whose parents like thought it was the devil or it was going to lead him to Satan worship, just like with Harry Potter, just like with anything else that gets popular. But by and large, like it was a unifying thing. Like everyone, no matter how different they otherwise were from you, everyone knew and liked Pokemon. To some capacity. Hell, even my boss at work, who it's funny, he's actually checked out our podcast a little bit, despite being about as far from a gamer as you can possibly be in this world. Great guy. He's just not really into games at all. But he thought about doing a sports podcast, so he wanted to hear what we were doing, so he could be like, okay, can I really do this or not? And you know, even he, despite being not the kind of person who even as a kid would pick up a video game, he bought and sold the cards for profit. Like he would buy packs and sell them to the kids at school who actually played to make money. And so it was still just a very, like, yeah, I remember that experience even for him, despite the fact that he was very far removed from the franchise. So, I feel like just about every generation has something. There was, Star Wars in the 70s, and before that even, God, I can't even imagine. I know that there were things, I just don't know what they are because I'm so far removed from that generation that I just couldn't tell you. Annie Oakley, maybe, on the radio would have been a big thing back in the day.
Star Wars in the 70s. It was acid in the 60s. No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, another great memory I think that goes along with Generation 1 was waiting for Generation 2. The build-up, using the school's library computers to look online and find what little information had leaked from Japan on these new Pokemon, half of which were fake, was what a time to be alive. Like, what a time to be alive, and what a phenomenon to participate in.
Oh man, it was so exciting. I remember there was a kid at the local Pokemon League about 2-3 months before Gold and Silver launched in the U.S. who had copies of English patched Japanese ROMs of Gold and Silver on little floppy disks and was selling them for like $5 each. And
oh my God.
I remember buying one of those and taking it home and playing it and just losing my mind, being like, there's no way this is real. There's no way. This is a fan game. Someone made this shit. There is no way this is real Pokemon. It blew my fucking mind. And then, of course, I was the fucking cool kid in school when they actually came out because I actually kind of knew what the fuck I was doing already. So everybody was just like, holy shit, how do you get this one? Where do you find that one? And I was telling them the wrong names of shit because it was a shitty fan translation. But no, like, yeah, it was really, really cool just to be a fan of the franchise during that time. I agree. That was a very special time to be a fan.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. I didn't have a hack of the game like that, but I remember finding a bootleg strategy guide, and I mean, to this day, every time I see Ampharos, I instinctively think his name is Denryu because that's his Japanese name, and that's just what I knew him as for a year before the game came out. And when you're a kid, a year is like 5 years, so a long time. And yeah, man, that to me, honestly, what's more fun than playing the games themselves is the time period when they're announcing a new Pokemon generation and they're revealing new Pokemon, and that excitement of, oh man, I can't wait till I finally get to see all 100 new Pokemon. And that to me is the most fun aspect of being a Pokemon fan.
I can definitely get on board with that. Like the leak and release cycle is very, very hype, and it's a very fun thing to be a part of. I know that I touched on this briefly with Raichu, but just out of curiosity, as a very old school, very long term fan, what are your thoughts and feelings in general on the Alolan forms of the old Kanto Pokemon?
Oh, I love it. I don't love every single one, but A lot of them. Most of them are pretty damn awesome, and I think it's a really cool idea. I would love to see moving forward for them to do more of that idea, like the next region. I would love to see the next region have a few new mega evolutions and a few, let's say the next region is called Ueva, a few Uavan forms. You know, I think that was a really brilliant, cool idea that if a fan had suggested it, I might have called stupid, but the second they revealed it, I think the Vulpix was one of the first ones they revealed, and I was just like, oh, yeah, I'm on board. An Ice-type Vulpix, Alolan Vulpix, that's beautiful. Alolan Marowak, like, so many of them are great. I love it.
Oh man, I think my favorite of all of them is Muck, because I always loved Muck, but Poison was just such a flawed type in Gen 1 because of the overarching dominance of Psychic, that having a Muck now who can just be like, yo, I'm immune to Psychic and I got Crunch, what bitch? It's amazing. It's amazing.
They're all pretty. There's a lot of them are Dark type, I noticed, which is interesting. Yeah, I love the Alolan forms. I absolutely do. The Marowak is another one of my favorites. I'm trying to remember them all.
How do you feel about Alolan Dugtrio?
I could do without Alolan Dugtrio. I could do without Alolan Exeggutor. But you know, they are what they are.
I've got to say, I feel like I don't know how I feel personally about Alolan Alolan Exeggutor. I don't know if like I would ever rock him on my squad, but I do feel like that design is very quintessentially Pokemon. Like it is not only just the goofiness, but that particular brand of goofiness is just very, very Sujimori.
Yeah, you know, it is what it is. There's Pokemon that you don't like. I've grown to accept that. I don't lose my shit over a Pokemon I don't like some people. Like, you know what? The vanilla ice cream Pokemon is not the worst Pokemon, and it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, again, Generation 1 gave us Pokeball with eyes and literal pile of poop. Like, everybody can get over the bag of trash and the ice cream.
Oh, you know, the bag of trash is kind of cool, too.
I actually really, really dig Trubbish and Garbodor. Like, I'm glad. One of my favorite aspects of the TCG is the fact that it gives Pokemon who just don't shine in the actual video games a chance to be really, really good and really valuable. And I love the fact that Garbodor is one of the best TCG cards in the current meta. Like, that makes me
that's cool.
It makes me so deeply happy that derpy, broken sack of trash is actually fucking useful.
Now, how do you feel about Mega forms, if I can ask you a question? Mega evolutions, excuse me.
You know, I didn't know how I felt about them initially. Like, it felt like a very Digimon-y concept, which isn't terrible. Like, I don't dislike Digimon, but, you know, I don't necessarily like my peanut butter and my chocolate when it comes to my monster fighting video games, if that makes any amount of sense. I feel like they were mostly executed very well, and again, as somebody whose favorite type is bug type, with so many bugs out there that just are neutered almost, getting now a second chance at life through their megas, specifically Pinsir. Pinsir was my favorite Pokemon originally, my first favorite Pokemon, and the fact that Mega Pinsir is so good as compared to regular Pinsir, which is so bad, made me very happy. I don't like the fact that they're so centralizing. Like, you have to have a Mega on your team if you're playing a format that allows them if you want to be competitive. I don't like the fact that they gave Pokemon like Garchomp and Salamence Megas. Like, they didn't need them. I feel like Megas, just like Alolan forms, are something that should have been very much relegated to the less viable Pokemon that were left behind in the power creep, or maybe just weren't very well statistically designed and were never very good to begin with. And it's really unnecessary to give Mewtwo 2 Megas, or to give Rayquaza a Mega. Like, they don't need them. They're amazing Pokemon as they are. Like, let's give them to more shit like Spinda.
I see you. Coming from somebody who's more into the gameplay, I can totally respect that opinion. And from my perspective, though, I think it's just really cool mythology-wise that like Rayquaza and Mewtwo have mega forms and whatnot. I think what I want them to do, I mean, I want them to give Farfetch'd an evolution or a mega evolution because I love Farfetch'd and he needs something. But I think it would be a really cool opportunity for them to give Eevee a Mega Evolution, because I don't think you'll ever give Eevee a normal type evolution. So it's like that's their way to fill that hole of the normal type evolution to Eevee, is like, well, you can Mega Evolve Eevee, and it's like, like the Normion. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's valid. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, particularly since they gave Eevee its unique Z move. Like that's, I mean, don't get me wrong, they don't seem to have any problems with heaping all of the new shiny shit on Eevee to the detriment of every other Pokemon. But a Mega and a unique Z move would be a lot for a base form. It's not even an evolved Pokemon. It's still possible though. This is the Pokemon company that we're talking about. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that things like Mega Mewtwo and Mega Rayquaza aren't epic, and there's definitely a need for epic things in Pokemon. It frustrates me when they give Megas to Pokemon that aren't very good, and that makes them usable, but because you can only have one Mega per team, they're still not being used because there's better versions. Mega Pinsir's not seeing usage because Mega Salamence does what he does better, despite the fact that regular Salamence was already perfectly usable, that kind of stuff. But yes, that's very much from the perspective of someone who plays for gameplay, and not everybody plays that way, and that's totally cool.
And that's why I get my ass whooped every time I battle with any of my friends, but yeah, that's something that's sour to me too. I mean, for example, Farfetch'd is one of the worst Pokemon ever. If I put Farfetch'd on my team, it's a death sentence. Like, so to me, I just like the idea of picking your favorite Pokemon and playing with them. But I can't argue with it, because in the real Pokemon world, there would be people who are so dedicated to Pokemon training that they would know all about things like EVs, and they would know how to really hardcore train their Pokemon, and they would whoop anyone's ass who didn't do that, who carried around a Farfetch'd. So it really is in line with creating a real Pokemon world that, like, I can't complain that someone a lot of people complain about EV training ruined Pokemon, because once everybody figured out how to hack the system, not hack it, but if you didn't spend all your time doing it, you'd just get your ass beat. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, that's how any skill works. If you don't spend all your time learning to play guitar, somebody's going to play it better than you.
No, yeah, and again, this is getting way off into some left field tangents, but I feel like they're cool tangents, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, let's do
it. Personally, I kind of long for like the Gen 4 days where all of those mechanics existed, but they weren't so transparent. Like, as someone who likes to breed Pokemon, and since I'm breeding them anyway, I might as well breed them to be really, really good. Overall, most of the time if I'm breeding for shinies, because I like the pretty colors. But if I'm going to be breeding in, the hundreds anyway to get that shiny, I might as well get really good stuff to give out on Wonder Trade. So I try to breed for competitive move sets and natures and all that mumbo jumbo. And as someone who does those things, I can appreciate how much easier and more transparent those systems are now to get into. I wouldn't have done it in those older games. I just wouldn't. If I had been breeding for shinies at all, it would have been just for the shiny, maybe for the nature, and I'd have been ignoring everything else because it was too damn hard. But it made those Pokemon unique. The whole original point of EVs and IVs was so that my Charizard is not the same as your Charizard. They are their own unique individuals, and these hidden behind the scenes maths are what determine what make them different. And now that those maths aren't so hidden and aren't so behind the scenes, like once you reach a certain level of really any competitive play, my Charizard is no longer different from your Charizard unless we just chose a slightly different moveset for them. Like, if we didn't breed them to perfection, we are just asking to lose because it's so transparent that everyone can do it. And I understand the reasons that they did it, and again, the breeder in me appreciates those, but I do kind of miss the childhood days where it was just a mystery, where some Pokemon were just better than others.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I appreciate it because that's what would happen in a real world. Now, there are breeders that know what to look for that people would like to give out on mystery trade, and there are people that are competitive, and the competitive people spend all their time training and researching the best ways to win battles, which is what would happen in the real world. And then there's the schlubs that hang out on Route 2, and they have a sand shrew and a caterpie and an oddish. And maybe I am one of those schlubs, but the point of Pokemon is to have a connection with your Pokemon, and even no one has a bigger connection with their Pokemon than youngster Joey. So I do miss being able to, like just have a Pokemon battle and not know who's going to win, which I haven't had that happen in 15 years. It's always like, sure, I'll Pokemon battle you. I don't mind losing today. But
it's a different game environment than it was when we were kids. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And, I say that now, and one of my most vivid Pokemon-related memories was, my closest brother is actually 11 years younger than me. So there's a pretty substantial gap between us. And when he was little, one of the few things that we could really connect on a personal level was Pokemon. Like, he thought it was really cool. This was around the time that Generation 3 was coming out. So I was a sophomore, junior in high school. He would have been like 5. And so he would always want to come hang out with me and my friends, like especially if he heard or knew that we were going to be doing anything Pokemon related. And one time he came over and we were playing, I think Stadium, just like putting teams together and fighting each other for shits. And like he picked a Rattata and wanted to fight us. And we just kept beating his ass, like mercilessly, destroying this 5-year-old kid in his Rattata. And he was like crying, being like, but if I believe in its heart, it's gonna win. And we're like, no, you stupid little shit. You can believe in it all at once. You're still believing in a Rattata. But ultimately, he was the purest Pokemon trainer of us all, because that is the lesson.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone in the Pokemon world is a competitive battler. That's just who the games follow. So if your favorite Pokemon is Rattata, you're forced by narrative of the game to participate in these battles. But if you lived in that world, there's nothing to say you couldn't just chill with your Rattata, maybe battle other Rattata enthusiasts and see who had the stronger Rattata.
Now I'm just imagining that there's like a Rattata lovers club that meets in the Viridian City Pokemon Center every Monday and Friday, and
well, there's got to be. I mean, there's definitely like a sect of people that love rats in this world, just like there's cat people and dog people. There's definitely rat people because they're fascinating little creatures. So yeah, I imagine there is. Youngster Joey's just our glimpse into that world. There's a whole subreddit for Youngster Joey's type.
He is the king of r/Rattata. Now I need to go see if that subreddit's taken, and if not, I need to register
it. Yes.
All right. Well, I think that we could continue this conversation literally all night, which would probably be very entertaining for us, but not necessarily for the listeners. Nathan, out of curiosity, I know you touched on this briefly when we first started talking. How did you first become interested in podcasting?
Well, I've always loved audio, and I've always loved the idea of using a medium to its like using a medium in a way that you could only use that medium, like Stanley Kubrick does with film or Alan Moore does with comics. And before podcasting was a thing, I listened to lectures, I listened to people talk. I remember downloading speeches on the early internet to listen to before podcasting was ever a thing. But my earliest memories in podcasting would have to be the earliest thing coming to mind is Kevin Smith's podcast, when Kevin Smith started doing Smodcast. But I know that that wasn't the first podcast I had heard of. I know that I had listened to a podcast or two before that, but I guess that was when it became a part of my life, that I actually was like, okay, well, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. He's the filmmaker behind Clerks, Mallrats, Jay and Silent Bob, Dogma, Chasing Amy. And I just listened to his podcast almost out of obligation, because he's one of the big three. It's Pokemon, Kevin Smith films, and Jurassic Park. Those are my obsessions. And South Park, I guess. So there's 4. I just like I said, it's the perfect form of entertainment because you can do it when you're doing things that would otherwise preclude you from reading a book or watching a movie or partaking in any other form of entertainment, playing a video game. You can listen to a podcast, not at any job, but at a lot of jobs. You can listen to a podcast while you're cleaning your room, while you're riding a bike or walking or driving a car or exercising. And I just started listening to a ton of podcasts. I ride my bike everywhere. A lot of the jobs I've had, I get to spend at least half that time listening to podcasts. And I wanted to start my own for a while before I actually did. I just loved podcasts, and I knew that I could do a good one if I tried. And so I made a bunch of really shitty podcasts and eventually got good at it, I think. And I mean, that's what I try to do is make something that could only be a podcast and do that to the best that I can do. And like, that's what Fairpoint is, for example, our newer episodes of Fairpoint and whatnot. It's just, I love it. It's my favorite medium. I'm obsessed with it.
And I mean, you probably already kind of answered this just within general, the fact that it's a much more flexible medium, but just in general, what do you feel makes podcasting such an interesting medium to work with as opposed to online video, as opposed to streaming, as opposed to any of the competitors, I guess you could say?
Oh, geez. Besides what I've already mentioned, there's still so much more. I mean, the long form, it's the perfect platform for a comedian, podcasting, because it's not like Saturday Night Live where every week, if you're doing a weekly podcast, it's not like Saturday Night Live where you have to like sit down in your writer's room and write a bunch of sketches and act them out and practice them and do them and make them good. No offense to the people. They're all very funny people on that show, but I don't think Saturday Night Live is funny. And that's kind of why. But with a podcast, two comedians sitting down and talking to each other is funny in a way that two comedians who aren't Matt Stone and Trey Parker having a week to write something funny isn't. And I think the long form aspect of it brings so much to the comedy because you can build on jokes, and the jokes at an hour are so much funnier than the jokes in the first 10 minutes because you've both been learning about the same thing for an hour and a half, and there's callbacks, and it's a great vessel for comedy. Recently, like I said, we've been doing radio plays, and it's a challenge, but a delight, like to write for audio only. Like there are moments when that makes it easier, and there are moments when that makes it infinitely more difficult. And geez, I love it. It's and it's young. It's young, so it's not defined. There aren't necessarily standards. Like a podcast could be anywhere from 18 minutes to 4 hours long, and sometimes people tell me, oh, they're too long, that's why I don't listen to them, whereas I prefer a good 2-hour podcast. So as you can tell, it takes me 30 minutes to answer your very simple questions. It's no wonder this is the field I decided to get into, but I love it.
No, that's really awesome. That's really awesome to hear. Yeah, there's a lot to love there. Now, I guess personally, as far as your creative process and your properties are concerned, who would you consider to be your biggest influences on your show? Like what content do you listen to, or did you listen to previously that you feel like had a pretty big hand in shaping Fairpoint and Fair Enough and Silph Radio?
Sure. Let me throw, actually, just because it just occurred to me that it's one of the most important things. One more thing to that last question is you learn when you listen to podcasts, even if it's just about the production behind a movie, or even if it is about something historical or scientific. You learn, and if you listen to podcasts all day, you learn a ton of shit, and it's awesome. But my specific influences, honestly, they're not so much podcasts. My influences are more Kevin Smith, but not his podcast. Like, I mean, his podcast can be great, don't get me wrong, but it is not at all a model. He has inspired me. Like when he talks about, just making a podcast, like that's definitely inspired me, and I get behind that. But I mean, his writing, Matt Stone and Trey Parker of South Park's writing, everybody that I listen to talking, like I used to listen to a lot of like Buddhist speakers and stuff, and I love the art of language. So like all the authors that I grew up reading, that would use language to like best effect, and the comic book writers like Grant Morrison and Alan Moore and all my favorite authors. When I'm on the spot, it's hard for me to come up with them, but Christopher Moore is one of my favorite authors, and Tom Robbins, and I have boxes and boxes and boxes of books, and I'll be kicking myself for not listing off all my favorite authors. But it's not podcasters. It's other mediums, and me seeing the potential in podcasting that isn't there, and wanting it to reach that same level, of respect that people will give, or consideration that people will give to like TV and movies and music, that this isn't just a throwaway episode you listen to for your drive, but this is a piece of art that I put work into, and I hope can stand on its own as a piece of art, like any good movie or episode of a TV show could. I hope that addresses the question. It's not exactly what you asked, but
no, totally. And yeah, I mean, obviously, all of the different content that you consume, whether it is the format as what you're putting out, is definitely going to inform the content that you're putting out in the world. That's totally valid. Now, if we have any listeners out there who have been inspired by their media intake, by your show, by maybe, if I'm lucky, ever our show, to decide that they want to do something similar, that they want to start their own podcast, what advice would you give to a brand new podcaster starting out trying to find their voice?
Best advice is just start. Like, no matter your limited like budget, what tools you have to work with, start. Download Audacity. It's a free program. Like, if you have a Mac, use an Apple earbuds to record. Like, they don't sound bad, at all. Find somebody that you can do it with, and just start, because if you don't just start, it's never going to happen. And then go from there, and eventually you're going to hate your early episodes. Be okay hating your early episodes, and be okay like hating the stuff you're making. You have to, and be comfortable pretending it doesn't exist at a certain point and just leaving it there, like I do with like the first few episodes of Fairpoint. And just do it and stick to it, and treat it as art. Don't treat it as like this disposable, oh, everybody does YouTube, I'm going to do YouTube too because it's a platform available to me and it's another way to placate my ego. Do it, treat it as art. Like, treat your podcast as something you'd want to be proud of, to show your mom, or to show a teacher from high school that thought you were going to go far and you didn't go far, and all you have to show for yourself is your podcast. Make sure that episode of the podcast makes that teacher proud. Like, it is an art. Treat it as such. The music you put into it, the amount of time you spend editing, spend a lot of time editing. Don't just throw it together. Spend 7 hours editing an hour-long podcast if you want it to sound good and be good. You can fool someone into thinking a shitty podcast is a good podcast just by making it sound good. I did it with Silph Radio.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, I thank you for sitting down with me tonight. I really, really appreciate it. I hope that our listeners have enjoyed listening to this back and forth. I know that I've enjoyed participating in it. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, our guest tonight is Nathan Kay. He is the host of Silph Radio Podcast, which is available at, Nathan, I believe it's secretroommultimedia.com, correct?
Yes, secretroommultimedia.com. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this too, man. It's been a great opportunity and a great honor.
Absolutely. And guys, I'm not going to go super in depth on this because I don't know exactly when this episode is going to air. And if there's a more recent update to give on the situation, I'll have already given it on that show. But again, I met Nathan through some difficulty he's having regarding the branding of his show, which is really unfortunate. And the biggest concern there is making sure that if people look for Silph Radio online, that they find Silph Radio podcast. So do me personally, do Blastburn Radio a solid. Like Silph Radio podcast on Facebook, comment on their posts, check out the Silph Radio subreddit. There's some pretty cool, Nathan's show really, really lends itself to discussion. He talks about a lot of really interesting, deep concepts, and that's a really, really great place to have that discussion. And he's actually active over there. So, if you want to throw out your personal take on content that he covers in one of his episodes, he's likely to talk back to you. I mean, that literally happened to me, and was really, really cool. So yeah, just be active, help those sources rise in the Google results, and help make sure that if you look for that show online, that you find that show, because it's excellent and it's really, really worth spotlighting for us as a community.
And thank you in advance. Yes, thank you. And yeah, if I haven't made it abundantly clear, I love to talk. So reach out to us. We love having the fans be a part of the conversation.
Okay, awesome. Well, Nathan, once again, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Everybody, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and throw our show back to our normal cast of hosts, and we will give you guys our updates before letting you go for the day. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Have a great one.